Good evening, and welcome to Lightning Talks presented by the Seattle Aquarium. I'm Jim Wharton. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm the Director of Conservation Engagement and Learning here at the Aquarium. The Seattle Aquarium is located on the shores of Puget Sound in the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people. But tonight, our event is 100% virtual. We appreciate the opportunity to welcome you from wherever you call home, and we hope that you and yours are staying safe and healthy. Now it's time to kick off another season of Lightning Talks. And if last year was any indication, there is no better way to do it than talking about sharks. There may be no more inspirational animals in the sea than sharks and rays, but they inspire more than just fear. Tonight you'll hear a little bit about how they inspire technological innovation and maybe even the next generation of marine biologists. If you've never experienced Lightning Talks before, here's what you can expect. 5 speakers have 5 minutes each to share one big idea and not 1 second more. They'll get warnings at 1 minute, at 30 seconds, and then at time. We don't have a hook long enough to reach them all, but if they go over, they'll get this. Now we want to keep things moving tonight, so we won't stop for questions after each speaker. But if you have questions or comments, please do put them in the chat. And at the end, we'll bring all our speakers back to the virtual stage and we'll have a great Q&A. So keep those questions and comments coming. We'll be collecting them and we'll feed them to the speakers at the end of the evening. Now, if you enjoy what you see tonight and you'd like to support the Seattle Aquarium, please do consider a donation. When you donate to the Seattle Aquarium, you're joining us in our mission of inspiring conservation for our marine environment. And if you haven't yet, click like and subscribe. We've set a goal to reach 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and we're getting really close. So you can help us get there. Please help us out. Maybe spread the word a little too. Now, we have a great program tonight, and I'm incredibly excited to get started. And so with no further ado, allow me to welcome our first speaker, Lisa Whitenack.
Hello.
Hello, Lisa. Now, Lisa's a paleobiologist at Allegheny College. She studies the biomechanics and evolution of fossil and living sharks. And although she really loves talking about Megalodon, tonight she's going to be sharing the results from a recent paper on how sharks, shark science, and shark scientists are represented or misrepresented on Shark Week. Yep. Lisa, are you ready to kick us off?
Yep, ready to go.
The floor is yours.
Great, thanks. Hi, everyone. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we learned from watching 201 episodes of Shark Week. That's 201 episodes over their 32 or so years that they've been on the air. And it wasn't just me, it was all these lovely folks that you see on the screen here. So Shark Week is kind of a big deal. It is one of the biggest platforms that marine science has. So just some facts and figures for you. In 2020, according to Variety magazine, there were over 21 million viewers. And a lot of those viewers are tuning into Discovery Channel just to watch Shark Week. So 37% of them didn't watch Discovery Channel before that. So they're pulling in a larger than normal audience. With great power comes great responsibility. And so Shark Week has received a lot of criticism for some of the ways that folks feel like they've dropped the ball on this. Everything from not representing shark science well, focusing on too few species, but also criticism for the experts that they're featuring. Audiences and critics have the perception that it's mostly white males that appear on Shark Week. But nobody's actually tallied it up. And so we wanted to do that, not only to see who's being featured on Shark Week, but also where are they filming, what kind of science is being filmed, and what sharks are being featured. So we did that. We watched 201 of the 279 episodes that have aired since the start all the way up until last year. We didn't include this year's Shark Week. And we wrote down what we saw and then counted things. I'm not going to talk about all these things tonight because I only have 5 minutes, but I want to focus on the people. So we took the names down of everyone that had been presented as a shark expert on these programs, and we did two things. We did a lot of internet research to see what kind of pronouns that folks were using either on their social media or what pronouns were being used for referring to these folks in news articles and things like that. And what we found is absolutely 0% in our research were using non-binary pronouns or identified as trans, at least online. And the overwhelming majority were referred to or used he, his pronouns. So that's 78.4%. For race, we basically tried to get a sense of whether audiences would perceive these experts as white or white passing or not. And this doesn't mean this is how these folks identify, but we needed to get some sort of metric. 93.1% of the experts were coded here as white or white passing. Now, this is not an accurate representation of shark scientists at all. The American Elasmobrain Society, which is here with AES, when we look at the membership there, we're 55.8% female. So there are a lot of female shark scientists out there. And then you're going to hear Jasmin Graham talk about Minorities in Shark Science, which has over 300 members. So, you know, folks are here. We're just not showing up on television. And this gets a little bit more upsetting when you see where we're filming these episodes. So this is by country, and we have the number of shows on the x-axis here. While the US is most popular, look at what comes after this: Bahamas, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, and Mexico. So a number of these countries are definitely not white majority. So we're featuring white scientists and taking them to these countries instead of featuring the local folks that do the work. We also look to see whether these are scientific experts. Do they have publications and things like that? And what we saw was a lot of folks are on repeat. So out of the 229 experts that have been featured on Shark Week, a little around half have been featured more than once. When you look at people who've been on 10 or more times, they are all white males. There are 9 of them. Most of them are in that 10 to 20 range, but one has been featured over 40 times. And a lot of these folks aren't actual experts. When we look at those scientific publications, 22% of them have none, 15.2% have 1 to 5, which means that we have some early career folks mixed in there. So why does this matter? Well, I'm a parent, and I think about me growing up watching Shark Week, and I didn't see people that looked like me, and that didn't make me think I could do this. So if we can show the folks that are doing it, we're going to inspire a lot of folks and show them that they are welcome in this field, right? So if you can see it, you can be it. And I passed in just a little under 5 minutes. Yay.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I know that 5 minutes it's scary, but you slid in there really easily. So very nice. I've heard people say, well, I don't watch Shark Week anymore. I've just written it off. And to me, that feels like a mistake. I mean, it's such a massive potential audience. Is there another time when we're talking about the ocean as much as then?
I mean, National Geographic has done some of these kind of, they do Shark Fest and things like that. But other than that, unless the sharks are in the news for some other reason, we're not really talking about them or learning about them very much. Unless you have kids like I do that love the Octonauts, and then we learn about sharks all the time. Nice. It's a great show if you haven't watched it. Good for big kids too. Yeah. But yeah, so there is some good stuff on Shark Week, right? I'm not saying that all of it's bad, and that larger analysis that we did shows that, but it could be better.
It could be better indeed. Yeah. Thank you so much, Lisa. I really appreciate it. Now, Lisa's going to be back at the end of the program, so if you have questions for Lisa, don't forget to put those into the chat, and we'll bring them back around at the end. And we'll be seeing you much later, Lisa. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Jasmin Graham, and speaking of Shark Fest, we'll hear a little bit about how she and her organization are interacting with Shark Fest. Jasmin is a marine ecologist interested in the conservation of endangered sharks and rays. She's also the president and CEO of Minorities in Shark Science, a science communicator, educator, and advocate of social justice in the field of marine science. Tonight, she's going to share how she and her organization are helping to address some of the issues that Lisa just talked about. Jasmin, are you ready to go?
I'm all set.
All right. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So Like was mentioned, I'm the CEO of Minorities in Shark Sciences, which was founded by myself and 3 others. And we're super excited to be a part of Shark Fest 2022. Minorities in Shark Sciences is an organization that is dedicated to supporting women of color interested in shark science. And we do that a lot of ways, from kids all the way to adults. But a lot of what we're focused on is providing a support system, mentorship, and then just like Lisa was saying, representation matters. So taking up space, being seen, letting people know that science is for everyone and anyone can be a scientist. So I'm a shark scientist. I study sharks and rays. It's something that I love to do that I've been doing for about 8 years now. But until 2020, just before we founded MIST, I had never met another Black woman who studied sharks. So at the age of 25, I think that was 25, I had never met someone that looked like me and did what I do. And this was annoying. And like Lisa was saying, when we were looking at Shark Week and Shark Fest and these TV shows that are a big audience that kids are looking at and young people are looking at, we're seeing all the same type of person, which is not representative of who can be a scientist and who is a good scientist. And so I was looking at this, and I spoke to a writer with Reality Blurred, and was featured in this article, Shark Week and Shark Fest experts are mostly white men, why, and does it matter? And some people might say, as an early career person, do you really want to call out major TV networks? And the answer to that is decidedly yes, if they need to be called out. And I'm glad that I did that, because following that, the National Geographic, one of the executive producers, reached out to Miss and said, we heard you. You called us out and you are right. We are part of the problem and we want to be part of the solution. And so we partnered together to make some really awesome programming that's going to be happening in Shark Fest 2022, featuring MIST members, so women and gender minorities of color, throughout all of their programming, some programming that those folks are participating in as a panel of experts, some that are the main talent for the episodes, which is not something that we see a lot, and we've seen a lot in the past. And this matters because, like Lisa said, if you're a kid and you're watching TV and you don't see someone that looks like you doing this thing, you might think that that thing is not for you, which is not the case. And this has been a super impactful experience, even just some of the things that we've had rolling out so far, just having little kids and their parents email us and say, oh, hey, we saw this article, or we saw this person on TV and this is my kid and they're super excited about it. And they drew a picture and they're drawing a scientist that has kinky hair like you and that has like dark skin. And they're like me. They have the hair like me. They have skin like me. We've got little Latina girls just super excited that, I mean, like Melissa, who's a MIST member, is on the shows all the time, and they're really excited because she speaks Spanish and she looks like them. And this has a really big impact on whether someone pursues science as a career or whether they are afraid of it and fearful that they're not going to belong. And we're changing the system. The game is changing. I Googled shark scientist, and this is what comes up. You can see all the people that I have circled here. So we've got Black women. It's Carly twice. We've got Melissa, as I mentioned, Latina woman. She's there. We've also got some other, shark scientists of, great renown. Eugenie Clark, probably one of the most well-known women of color in shark science. She was a fantastic person. And then we've got some other people mentionings of women in shark science. So things are changing, and Shark Fest 2022 is coming up. I hope that everyone will tune in, and I'm really excited for a diversity of sharks and shark scientists. Hashtag not just white sharks and white men. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jasmin. Jeannie Clark was my inspiration to go into marine biology, and I know that she's seminal to so many marine biologist careers, and I'm super excited to see Shark Fest next year. And this idea of diversifying the scientists we see on TV, it's more than just making better TV and representation. It's actually making better science, right? I mean, where you have a more diverse pool of scientists conducting research, you're getting better outcomes.
Yes, for sure. Innovation comes from a diversity of thought. And in order to have a diversity of thought, you have to have a diversity of experiences, cultures, backgrounds, all of that is needed. And we need innovation.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jasmin. Jasmin will be back for the Q&A. So if you have more questions, I've seen a few come through already in the chat. If you have questions or comments for Jasmin, please do put them in the chat. Jasmin, we'll see you in just a little bit. Our next speaker is Chris Pepin-neff. Chris is a teacher, research academic, writer, and commentator from the University of Sydney, who covers a wide range of public policy issues, including sharks. Chris and others have led a call to move away from the loaded phrase shark attack to something more accurate, and that effort's drawn all kinds of attention, hasn't it, Chris?
It has, and we're going to talk about that today.
Excellent. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
It's all yours.
Thanks so much, Jim. As Jim said, my name is Chris Pepin-neff, and I come to you from Australia, the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about shark attack and the fact that it's socially constructed. And my big idea for you for today is that shark attack is a lie, that it has been socially constructed and it has outworn its usefulness. Next slide, please. So you basically got like three options when we have a conversation like this, right? The first is that as conservationists, this is really useful. Second, as public citizens, myth busting is really important. And the third is that in a post-COVID world where we're all going to dinner parties, we need new content. So I've got 3 points for you for today. Next slide, please. So remember, our overarching issue when you walk into your dinner party is that shark attack is a lie that's misrepresented. And the reason is 3 facts. One, that 38% of labeled shark attacks have no injury. So we're talking about shark attacks with no injury. So it's not a shark attack. Second, 92% of people who are affected in communities that are affected by shark bites or shark attacks don't blame the shark. 92%. You could fall down a flight of stairs and we're not going to find 92% of people who blame the stairs. Third is that more than 50% of people directly impacted by shark bites think these are shark accidents, right? That these are accidents of nature. So those were 3 points that we're going to hang on to for today. Next slide, please. So, and what this illustrates is that shark attack really is invented, and it was made up by a well-meaning Sydney surgeon, Dr. Victor Coppelson, and a naturalist, also known as a big game hunter in the late 1800s. And they pushed the language, the discourse, from talking about it the way scientists often refer to it as shark accidents into shark attack. Next slide, please. And so myself and Dr. Bob Huter, who's the director for 20 years of the Moat Marine Lab in Sarasota, Florida, have put together a new way of thinking about human-shark interactions. Next slide, please. And it's these 4 categories, right? Shark sighting. So a shark swims by you and there's no injury. There's not probably even any contact. Shark encounter. Again, no injury. And a shark might bump into your kayak. Maybe the shark bumps into your jet ski or surf ski or surfboard. But again, no injury whatsoever. So we are distinguishing between intent, which is usually the way like shark attack is talked about, and intent and outcome, which is that there's no injury. And then we have our last 2 categories, which are the terrible ones, right? Our shark bites and our fatal shark bites, which are tragic and terrible. Next slide, please. But what we find, again, in looking at it here in this proportion on the right-hand side, proportion of incidents between 1979 and 2009, is again that 38% of reported shark attacks in New South Wales had no injury. New slide, please. Or next slide. So what I did is I did a survey in Western Australia and Perth, in Eastern Australia in Ballina for communities that were affected by shark bites. Next slide, please. And I asked them, who is to blame for shark bites? And you can see here at the bottom that it's 7% sharks and 8% sharks respectively. So 92% of people do not blame the shark for the shark bite. We see sort of a narrative around swimmers, but mostly we see a narrative around no one, right? That 62, 63, and 60% of people say no one is responsible. Next slide, please. So what that story tells us is that people are seeing these as accidents. And that's, again, what this question was. Are they intentional or are they accidents? Because shark attack is an assumption that there is intent on the part of the shark. But again, that is not what the data supports. It shows us that 50% of people say that it is an accident. Next slide, please. And so I might just leave you with this one more data point for your dinner party, which is that 75% of people, when asked how should people respond to a shark bite, these accidents of nature, responded and said that it should be a non-lethal response. So you don't go kill the shark, right? You don't put in shark nets. You don't go have a shark hunt. It's not Jaws. Instead, we should have a non-lethal response to dealing with sharks. So those were our three facts that we've got for today, right? The 38% are non-injurious. There's no injury. I wanted to get lightning.
I'm sorry, Chris. We're going to call that a lightning accident.
That's awesome.
So, it's funny. I know that I've heard that this has been going on a little while, this conversation about shark attacks versus shark. And, you'll hear people say it's just semantics, right? It's just semantics. But language is important, right? Language is a reflection of thought. It shapes our culture. And so it's not just semantics. This makes a difference on how people think and talk about sharks.
Yeah, and statistically, it makes a difference if you are talking about it as intentional. Mm-hmm. That leads people to conservation outcomes that are less likely to favor sharks, right? If people think that sharks are menacing movie monsters, and you talk about it that way, talk about them like movie monsters, then it's less likely that you're going to protect them.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Chris. If you have more questions for Chris, please do put those in the chat. And then Chris will be back for the Q&A a little bit later. Thanks a lot, Chris. Now, our next speaker is the Seattle Aquarium's own Grant Abel. Grant is our Director of Life Sciences and oversees the team charged with animal welfare and husbandry, including this new area of conservation breeding, which could be a key element to reestablishing depleted populations. Grant, are you ready to tell us more?
I think so, Jim.
It's all yours.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Kia ora. And welcome to tonight. This evening, I will be speaking a little bit about opportunities that aquariums have to help conserve and restore populations of some of the threatened species of sharks and rays in the wild. And Becky, how do I move this forward? There we go. Sharks are under siege. We know that. And unfortunately, through industrial fishing and also coastal fishing, they've been under siege for decades. They are facing a greater threat of extinction than perhaps many people may even realize. Some of those species are now listed as endangered, impacted by unsustainable practices. In some areas, they barely persist. And so the need for well-managed marine protected areas to enable these populations to rebound and thrive is high, and it's urgent. Insurance populations that we can find in zoos and aquariums, aquariums specifically, are very important. And the value of a healthy, genetic, diverse population of sharks and rays under managed care can be illustrated in several ways. they can be insurance populations against the possible extinction of some species. They provide opportunities for research into nutrition, sensory capabilities, reproduction, social behavior, and more that would otherwise be difficult, if not impossible, to conduct with some animals in the wild. And while the educational value for these animals in aquariums is also high and important, the need to change community action globally simply may not come in time. Oops. I'm having some problems here, Jim. That lightning's going to come quick, isn't it, Jim? Here we go. The value of these animals, as I said, in captivity can't be understated. The conservation planning tools are now available to help develop small-scale but strategic population recovery programs. Advancing our knowledge is a critical next step. But this new work needs to focus on ways really to augment and recover healthy populations in the wild and within marine protected areas, ideally, where some of the founders were originated. A relatively new approach, termed as the One Plan approach and developed by the IUCN Conservation Planning Specialist Group, combines all potential options into one comprehensive plan. And many other species of animals or plants are being supported in this way, and in some cases, extinction has been averted through this approach. Sorry, Jim, I'm just not sure why this is not advancing as it should. Here we go. The International Union for the Conservation of Nature at a recent global conference supported a motion, and being aware of the many successes in species recovery and the powerful role that and potential of accredited zoos and aquariums can play in species recovery, the World Conservation Congress recommended, among other things, the advancement of this approach, this One Plan approach, and the effective use of all of the available tools for conservation. They recommended that last-ditch efforts be prevented by proactive and timely application of planning methods such as this One Plan approach. Yeah. There we go. And while many species of sharks and rays are being maintained and managed in zoos and aquariums are breeding well, there are many knowledge gaps. The bowmouth guitar rays, for example, in the bottom right-hand corner, now critically endangered, still need a great deal of research and support before they can be really considered as a population for eventual species recovery. This work is critical. It must become a focus for zoos and aquariums moving forward.
Well, it looks like we've had a little bit of a technical glitch with Grant. No big deal. This is in the COVID world where we're all living screen to screen here, it's bound to happen sooner or later. We'll have Grant back with us in the Q&A, and you'll have a chance to ask some more questions about that, the captive breeding program, especially the programming that the Seattle Aquarium and some of our partners are doing in the Coral Triangle. Well, I think what we'll do is we'll move to our final speaker, Misty Paig-Tran. Misty is a marine biologist and a biomechanist at California State University, Fullerton. She blends biology and engineering to study performance in animals, particularly as it relates to feeding and armor. Are you ready to bring us home tonight, Misty?
I am. Can you see it okay?
Yeah, I think it looks, we'll see the screen share in just a second. Looks great.
Wonderful.
Take it away.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. Today, I'm hoping to inspire you to go out to nature and to figure out new technologies. So, thinking of such things, you probably all are familiar with at least the most famous of bioinspiration innovation, which is Velcro. So I would guess that the majority of you today have even used some Velcro in the past, which was actually developed based on plant burrs. Uh, Speaking of marine bioinnovations, that are sort of new and exciting that are coming up, we've actually started to look to things like hydrostatic skeletons, the trunks of elephants that can bend and move in lots of different ways, but uses water as the way to move this appendage. And so what we can do is we can start to develop new deep sea marine technologies that allow us to have robots that don't get crushed at crushing depths. More recently, some biologists over in Washington, near many of you, have looked to marine clingfish, a little fish that sticks on rocks and really rough surfaces in the intertidal. And they have created new technologies that allow for suction cups that stick not only in water, but also on rough surfaces, which is just unheard of with the suction cups that I use, at least in my shower. So this suction cup is so strong, it can lift up to 80 to 1,300 times its body weight. It's just incredible. And that's just happened in the past couple years. So I'm going to ask you now, and we're not looking at sharks, we're looking at rays, but what do you see? For some of you, you're going to notice that these things are just gliding through the water effortlessly. And that actually is inspiring new technologies for submersibles. For me, I look at the front end and I see all of these little particles in the water. That's plankton. That's living animals. And these animals are swimming through the environment and with their mouths open, just filtering through these organisms without ever having a clog. There's no current filter on the market that doesn't clog, but these things do it effortlessly. So we wanted to ask, how do they do this? We used to think that they worked sort of like a colander, where water and food particles could be strained, any of the particles would stay and the water would leave. But when we looked into the mouths of these things, we noticed that the particles were much smaller than the filters themselves. So how do they do this? Well, it's really hard to put a camera into the mouth of most of your large scale filter feeders, things like whale sharks and manta rays, basking sharks, and the baleen whales. But what we can do is we can start to model what their filters look like and use those models to discover what's actually happening. This is a video that my grad student took uh, of a manta ray filter. And what you see here are particles that are essentially bouncing along this, much like a pinball machine. And in fact, this is a new type of filtration that's never been seen before. In fact, we had the opportunity to name this type of filtration a ricochet filter. I'm sorry that I didn't name it a Misty filter. In retrospect, I probably should have. Just to show you how this works, this is some dye that is running over the filter. And what you'll notice are these little eddies are created inside of this filter. So what's happening is there's this cross flow that you see that up at the top in blue that's pushing particles back towards the esophagus or the end of the filter. And these little eddies are working not like a cyclonic filter like your Dyson vacuum. Instead, what they do is they make that pore very, very small so that they can accelerate those particles, and the particles basically jump all the way down the line. You might be wondering exactly how efficient this filter might be. And what you'll see here is that when we started to run these models, on the right, you see two different orientations of these filters. The blue is water and the red are the particles. When we look to the efficiency, we notice that at a pore size of around 1,100 microns, we actually can get down to about a fifth of that pore size with 100% efficiency and no clogging whatsoever. So why should you care? For me, I think that big filter feeders are going to improve your life with applications specifically for things like microparticles and microfibers that are just laden in our ocean water. So this technology is creating this new non-clogging, high efficiency and high volume filters that can be used in industries like in your wastewater treatments as fish screens, or even get attached to things like your washing machine to filter out those particles before they ever hit the marine environment. We do actually hold a patent that just got issued to us early this month, and with that, I'm done with 5 minutes.
Well done, Misty. Thank you so much. This filter work is so interesting. But when you started out looking at filtration systems, were you thinking specifically about these kind of technological, applications, or were you trying to answer other questions?
No, and I think this is a really important time to stress that basic research, you never know what you're going to find when you just look to nature. And it's really not until you start uncovering those layers that you start to find these new innovations. So we weren't looking for it at all, actually. We just wanted to know how mantas actually didn't clog, and then sort of discovered this wonderful new technology.
That's amazing. Well, Misty isn't going to go anywhere this time. This time we're going to bring all of our speakers back to the screen. Welcome back, speakers. This is your opportunity to get all of your Shark and Ray questions answered, so keep dropping those into the chat. I've already seen a couple great questions I'm looking to bring forward, but first, I want to know if any of you have questions for each other.
Gosh, there's lots of questions I have for everybody. I guess the first one I would say is for Lisa. Are there sort of tangible things we can do to help change this trend in Shark Week? Like, is there something we can do as viewers?
There's a couple different things. So viewers equal money to Discovery Channel, right? And so on the one hand, I don't want to say don't watch Shark Week, because we want some shark programming to keep happening. But you could turn the TV off when it's stuff that's pretty problematic. There were some shows on this last year that were particularly not great in terms of shenanigans with people interacting with sharks in ways that they shouldn't. Don't watch it. If you drop the viewership down, right, they are less likely to invest in programs like that. I can tell you, for my first year seminar here at Allegheny, we actually write to Shark Week, or to the producers or the executives in charge of Shark Week. They have never once answered our letters, so I don't know that a letter writing campaign would be particularly helpful. But I'd say, maybe vote with your remote controls. Although, Chris, you look like you want to chime in.
Well, I mean, the other thing to a certain extent, Lisa, is, and I say this as someone, when I was doing my PhD, I did Shark Week for one episode in 2015. But there is also a responsibility for those shark scientists who are appearing to make studies and deny ourselves the benefits that we receive on the basis of white supremacy or sexism or misogyny, and to make room and to be advocates for other people to speak, to have that space.
Yeah, I've been on one episode of Shark Week about Megalodon, which is a whole other thing. But that's something I think, especially when we're looking at those folks that have been on 10, 20, 40 something shows, right? They're all white men, and right, they could say no or recommend other people to be brought in, and maybe not the same person every time, right? There's lots of different ways that the scientists could do that. But in terms of viewers, right, and the folks who are probably watching this, I'd say vote with your remote controls.
Yeah, and it can be difficult based on like titles and descriptions, but there are people who are paying attention and understand how the programs are being developed. So I think of David Schiffman, the at Why Sharks Matter on Twitter. I pay attention. There's a number of us who are sort of watching what's going on, and so we'll give recommendations on, hey, please do look at this one. It has an amazing segment from Jasmin or Toby Engel, and you could find the information out there on Twitter and other social media platforms, and then vote from your remote and talk back. Because I think letters, sometimes it feels futile, but if I think about the mockumentary on Megalodon, there was outrage based on that, and that created change. Not enough, but it did create change. Lisa, there's a question from the chat, and they're wondering. So you looked at the entire breadth of Shark Week. Is it getting any better? Did you see any trends in the data?
So we did try to look for that. Just in general, in terms of messaging about sharks and conservation content and folks featured and things like that, and it's all over the place. So some years are really good with, where they'll have a few women, right? And unfortunately, a few is good for most years, right? But even thinking about the messaging, how sharks are portrayed positive or negatively, right? And sometimes that's by title. Sometimes that's what the narrators are saying. It's just a big spiky line that doesn't have any kind of trend at all. So, and even if we look at the last 10 years, it's all over the place. Yeah.
Hey, Jasmin, there's another question that came into the chat. They want to know what kind of outreach that you might do for individuals, say like in high school, who are thinking about pursuing a career in marine biology.
Yeah, so we have our Gill Guardians program, which is a bunch of online content for K through 12 and adults. And you can access that at gillguardians.mitzelasmo.org. And it has all sorts of activities and things. And then for educators, both formal and informal, we offer training to help them be able to bring the Gill Guardians content into their classroom. If you're located in Florida, we have Science by the Sea, where we bring teenagers out and talk about marine stewardship and get our feet wet, literally, and our hands dirty, literally, in our coastal ecosystems. And we're going to have our first summer camp. It's going to be happening this summer.
Well, that sounds fun.
And all of that is free. And we provide transportation.
That's amazing. Hey, Grant, I've got a question in the chat. What's the most important thing that aquariums can do to increase sort of appreciation of sharks, but also maybe what do you think are the most promising pathways that aquariums can play a role in conservation for sharks?
Yeah, this is a really important question. Thank you. Historically, aquariums have focused on some of the old paradigms around sharks, shark attack, the danger of sharks. Having toothy sharks behind glass, that sort of thing. That was really the old way. I think moving forward, aquariums have a real opportunity to really ensure that they have strong genetic diversity among the population, working with other aquariums to ensure a metapopulation is as diverse as possible, and really focus the habitats and the messaging around empathy programs and around the intrinsic value of the animals themselves, but also the value of the animals for strategic recovery programs in the wild, in particular with coastal species. There are so many species that are breeding well in aquariums, and a great many people who are working on that sort of in that space. But the aquariums have yet to really connect the dots and begin to work with more field biologists, work with folks in different areas of the world where these animals came from, and start to put animals back into the wild. Basically following the footsteps of many zoos that have been modeling this type of conservation action program very successfully. When you look at the condor, giant pandas, and other species that have been saved from extinction through these types of programs. I think that's really the new direction and a very important focus for zoos and aquariums moving forward.
And a very new direction for sharks and marine animals in general, right?
Yes, definitely.
So I have a curveball. Sharks raised in skates together are called elasmobranchs. Someone's asked about the etymology. One of them is ants and one of them is words.
Etymology.
The etymology of the word elasmobranch.
Yep, it translates to plate gills, and it has to do when you look at the cartilages that are inside the gills. They kind of make a plate structure with the septa that are in there, so they're named for their gill shape.
So that's why you go to the experts. Misty, there's a question about the efficiency of the filter. Is it only related to the size of the pore, or is it also the shape of it? So, what else is going on in that system?
Yeah, so we're very much still looking at that. In fact, my postdoc just came back from Washington trying to answer that. The short answer is that the pore actually is the least of the variables that help it work. It's very much the shape of the filter itself and the angle at which the water that's entering the mouth hits that sets up that beautiful vortex.
Nice. So Jasmin, I have a question for you from the chat as well. Do you think getting more minorities involved in biological science will make conservation an easier sell?
Absolutely, 100% unequivocally. So what happens in conservation, and what has happened, is that a lot of times it is people from certain places going to other places and deciding what they should do with their resources, even though they have just kind of like dropped in for a second and they have like a snapshot view, which I think is hilarious that someone thinks that they can go somewhere that people have been thousands of years and try and tell them what to do with their things, especially when most of those problems are caused by colonialism, which gave those people the structures that they have to be able to fly to all of these places and make these decisions. It's a whole thing. So the moral of the story is that if you have people from those communities involved in conservation, they actually know what's going on. And so it's better, it's more effective. And if you have someone telling a local fisher that is from the community, hey, I think this is a good idea, they're more inclined to be like, yeah, you know what you're talking about. But if there's someone that comes from some other place that tells them, they're going to be like, what? Okay, you don't even know what's going on. Get out of here. And that's what happens is like the issues with enforcement are because people aren't involved in the decision making and they feel like they have no part in the process and no one wants to be told what to do when they had no decision making in how the rules were going to be written. So yeah, having that, having diversity in the scientists and the conservationists and the policymakers and everyone at every level is really important so that people feel represented and they feel like they are connected to the process.
Diversifying the field, the conservation, and then seeing that on TV so that people have an understanding of what's necessary and then how they can play a role. That's fantastic. So Chris, I've got a question here. We've got someone, and I think I know exactly where they're coming from. They said that I know that sharks aren't out to harm people. But I can't convince my friends. Like, what secrets would you offer them to help people not see sharks as out to get people?
So it sort of goes to your earlier question about what you can do in aquariums. Mm-hmm. So I ran an experiment at Sydney Aquarium where we had 1,000 little citizen scientists, mostly young people who walked, which is why I'm jealous that Lisa talked to sixth graders the other day, and who came through a shark tunnel. And we asked them like 10 questions on the way in for like what their perceptions were of sharks. And we wanted them to look at one thing. We just wanted them to focus on the eyes of the shark and whether or not they thought the shark was looking at them. And I know that there are a bunch of different reasons why that's not a perfect question, because you might the glass and the lights and the thing. There's a million things, but my unit of study here is the person, not the shark. So I asked them to look at the shark and look at the shark's eyes, and they walked through. And when they found that sharks were sort of doing, like all fish, like sort of just doing their own thing. And sharks aren't movie monsters. They're not staring at you. They're not looking at you. They're not creeping. They're not lurking. They're not marauding. They're not and any of these things. When they came out the other side, there was a strong statistical connection between whether or not they thought sharks had any intentionality and whether or not they supported sharks at the end of the day, whether or not it changed. And so the number one thing I would say to people is, if we can change the language, if we can change the narrative that says that sharks are intentionally out to get people, that is the most profound statistical relationship between the human body and sharks as another species.
That experiment's really interesting to me because when we talk a lot about empathy here at the aquarium, and in many cases, it's not so important that you have the perfect idea of what the animal is thinking or feeling. It's that you try. Like the act of trying to take the perspective of an animal is the meaningful thing for you as a person. And it sounds like that was what was connecting in that study. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I might just add that pride is this next most important variable, that endemic value, right? The value that you have for a local species. We always, in Australia, we love the Tasmanian devil. Tasmanian devil is sort of a terrible creature, but it's Tasmanian, so people love it. So that endemic value, that local pride, is a real important factor.
Right. It's kind of like congressmen, right? People don't like congressmen, but they like their congressmen. So they like their sharks, right? I love that. So we're heading towards 7 o'clock, but we've got a number of more questions. So I'd love to keep going. Little bit of softball. Favorite shark array?
I'm a big fan of the bonnethead. I study sawfish, so if I was going with favorite ray, sawfish, favorite shark, bonnethead. I'm cheating. Nice. I'm picking 2.
It's very hardware oriented there.
I was going to pick 2 as well. So.
I did say shark or ray. I guess you could go one of each.
Can I pick an extinct one too?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so my favorite living shark is the frilled shark, which is a deep water shark.
Good.
Right? And their teeth look like tridents, little tiny tridents. And
gills.
Yeah, and I study teeth, right? That's how I study the fossils and the modern stuff. And so they're tridents that are also curved like a snake fang. So when I stick my hand in there to measure the teeth, I almost always shred my hand in gloves trying to get my hand back out. So they've got really cool teeth. And then my favorite fossil shark is not megalodon, but is one that's not really a shark. It's more closely related to ratfish. It's helicoprion.
Oh, I knew that was where.
Yeah, it's so cool. It looks like it has a buzzsaw for a mouth. It doesn't rotate. It doesn't do that. It just retains its teeth.
Yeah, those are really cool. We should try to drop that into the comments so that people can look it up, because it's just such a cool design, and I know that it confused scientists forever. There are all sorts of drawings of it, like whipping off of their dorsal fin or the tail. It's
like
fascinating.
Unwinding like a party favor. That's my favorite one.
I love that. All right, who else?
Hammerhead.
Hammerheads. Any specific hammerhead?
Probably a great hammerhead.
Great hammerhead. Got to go with the big one.
I'd have to say the spotted eagle rays, for me, are really fascinating creatures. Having worked with a number of them in different aquariums, and as people are finding, they're very amenable to operant conditioning, to training, to contact. And when they look at you with those eyes, you can really see that they're thinking. So from that perspective, the behavior and their ability to interact with you is really fascinating. One which is also fascinating would be the mobula rays, the mini mantas, and why?
I think people don't appreciate how smart sharks are. They're very trainable. Many aquariums are training them just like they're training their mammals. They certainly know the sound of the engines from boats that have been provisioning them in the wild. So it's they don't get enough credit, I think.
We had a horn shark in the lab when I was a grad student that would spit water at you and come up and spit at you when it wanted food.
Nice. So it was training you, yeah. Yep. Misty?
Yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and pick 2. So the mobula rays, absolutely, and manta being number 1, because biggest brain to body ratio of any of the elasmobrings, and self-aware apparently, according to science, so they can recognize themselves. And then of course mega mouth shark, which is one of the rarest sharks in the world, and we have no idea what the heck that thing is doing. But for those of you watching, if you've never seen one, please do look up a mega mouth shark. It's just incredible.
Yeah, bioluminescence inside their mouth.
So they wear bioluminescent lipstick.
Yeah. That's fantastic. That should just be a thing anyway.
I mean, I wish they would sell it.
Yeah, I'm wearing bioluminescent.
Well, I don't know if I get to play as the host, but I'm taking host privilege. Blue shark is my absolute favorite. It is just a long, slender, beautiful animal, so graceful. But I also want to give a shout out to the puff adder shy sharks,
Oh
which are
yeah. They're
they're
wild.
also called Happy Eddie, which I just love. It's nothing to do with them being happy or named Eddie. It's just a shortening of their scientific name. But man, what a beautiful animal! And
Mhm.
I love sharks that sort of break the mold in people's minds. Right? They're not gray. They're just beautiful. They have a different look. They have a different shape. They have different function. There's just so much that people, I think, don't appreciate about the diversity of sharks and rays. That's another thing that Shark Week could do much better at. There's so
Yes.
much to talk about.
hmm hmm
All right, as we wrap, one thing I'd love to hear from you is what's something that you're hopeful about related to shark conservation? What's something that gives you hope?
Hopeful or gives hope?
Gives hope to you about the future of shark conservation.
You know, go ahead.
I would say from all of the things that I've done with kids, I am hopeful because kids they're awesome. Like far more awesome than adults. I'm convinced that we get worse as we age. But they are so excited and to see, even if they've, been told that sharks are scary or like watched movies and things like that, as soon as you present them with other information, they're like, I'm sold. They're the best thing ever. And then they just like will go for the rest of their lives spouting shark facts. Like one time I taught this kid how to tell the difference between a male and a female shark in an aquarium randomly as I was walking through. And then I just hear this kid going, male, female, male, and like pointing at every shark, and was just so excited. So that makes me hopeful.
Nice.
Yeah, I think, Jasmin, I'm 100% with you. I do a lot of work with kids, and I'm in an hour and a half north of Pittsburgh, so like completely landlocked here. I mean, and there's no sharks in Lake Erie, right? So I talk to a lot of kids about sharks here, and they do a lot of the same things that you were just describing, right? They get really excited, and they ask lots of amazing questions. I don't know why we lose that ability to like fearlessly ask questions, right, as we age. But when they do hear about that, that's like, yeah, they focus in on that. And they're like, yep, I'm going to save the sharks. What do I need to do? Who do I talk to? Right. Yeah, I think you're 100% there. Yeah.
That's exactly where I was going. So I guess we're all on the same page between, I have two littles at home that are just obsessed with sharks, and not because mom works with sharks, but just like naturally kids just love sharks. And honestly, Jasmin gives me hope, right? Jasmin is bringing shark awareness to a whole group of folks who thought, maybe this doesn't apply to me. I don't see faces like me, and I don't see that how this applies. And so, Jasmin, thank you for what you do. And, I love that. I actually have a grad student who was in your program, and she came from there. So, you have inspired her to follow her dream with shark science. And I think that's exactly what we need.
Dang, y'all gonna make me cry.
Let's just sit right. Kids do love sharks. I was a kid who loved sharks, and at some point in our past, we're sort of trained out of it, right? We're taught not to love sharks, and that's a real shame.
I will say, Jim,
Yeah.
if I can, that there is I am pretty sure, I'm going to say it. I am pretty sure the New York Times has changed their policy in reporting on shark attacks and will no longer use the word attack. I've been tracking it for the last since they ran 3 stories on it in July about the change in language, and then since then, even including a terrible New York Times Magazine piece on Cape Cod, I believe they have changed their editorial reporting on human-shark interactions.
If there's hope for the papers, there's hope for us all.
I'm just going to say, Jim, I've worked with zoos and aquariums for several decades in a number of different countries. And as I look back, what gives me hope is the continuing change that is real and present in particularly accredited zoos and aquariums, moving away from the old menagerie style, eclectic, put a bunch of animals in a tank or behind baths, what have you, to being having very relevant populations of animals under managed care, relevant to species conservation in the wild. That's a very real continuum that we're seeing, that I've seen over my career, and it's increasing and expanding every day, as it needs to, because the need is quite urgent. Part of that, I think, is driven by all the kids that you've been just speaking to, as they grow up, become parents themselves, or become involved in the science in some form or another. So that does give me hope for the future, that evolution will continue and have a positive impact, reversing the extinction that we're all witness to at the moment.
Yeah, the kids should expect more. They should expect more from us as aquariums. They should expect
Yes.
more from the scientific enterprise. They should expect more from the New York Times and from Discovery Channel and from Shark
Yeah.
Week, and they'll get it. They'll get it.
They'll get it.
Well, thank you so much. The speakers, you're all amazing tonight. If we were all in person, you'd get the thunderous, standing ovation. Hopefully, we'll be seeing a string of emoji applause in the chat. Thank you all so much. If you enjoyed tonight's program, it's a free science event. Please do consider a donation to keep these kinds of programs happening. Programs like Lightning Talks, free and accessible for all. If you're local, come see us. The aquarium is open. We're still at a reduced capacity with time ticketing and with an ongoing emphasis on both staff and visitor safety. It's a really good experience, so please do come on down and visit us. Our next Lightning Talk event will be on February 17th. We're going to throw a light on the creatures of the deep. So people like to say that we know more about the moon or Mars than we do of the deep ocean. Those creatures can certainly seem a little alien, so come explore inner space with us in February. Should be really fun. Now, you can see all of our past Lightning Talks events, last year's shark event, orcas, otters, octopuses. It's all on our YouTube channel. And don't forget, you can help us reach that goal of 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So be like a shark and chomp down on that subscribe button. Don't let those videos swim by. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Have a great night.